Hello all, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about a poem Sunday Morning written by Wallace Stevens. A very interesting poem. At the same time it's worth studying, worth learning. Okay, let me begin. Sunday Morning. Sunday Morning by Wallace Stevens is an 8 stanza poem that is separated into sets of 15 lines. Unlike the majority of Stevens' poems, that piece is fairly well organized and written in blank verse. So, what is the speciality of this poem? Sunday Morning. It is written in blank verse. This means that the lines do not have a rhyme scheme but maintain the pattern of iambic pentameter. What is iambic pentameter? Each line contains 5 sets of 2 beats. The first of this is unstressed and the second stressed. It is unusual for a poem of this length to stick to a rhythmic pattern so strictly. Rarely would Stevens venture into this territory again, I think so. Okay. So the symbols and images used in Sunday Morning. The most important images of this piece are self-evident, and the most prevalent of this is the sun. It is included as part of the narrative from the beginning. It shines on the woman on her Sunday morning and represents comfort and peace. The sun is later used as a symbol for beauty and for the Christian God. Towards the end of the poem, a contrast is presented between Christianity and paganism, with a reference given towards the sun, acting like a god rather than being one. Finally, the sun appears again as a symbol for the chaos that makes up nature. A reader should also take note of the prevalence of birds in Sunday Morning. A cockatoo appears in the first stanza and is part of the reason the dreaming women's thoughts go in the direction they do. Birds stand in for freedom. They later come to represent beauty, happiness, peace, and paradise. They also feature in the final lines of the poem, perhaps flying onwards to their deaths. Themes in Sunday Morning. Throughout Sunday Morning, the speaker discusses the interactions between nature and humanity. To humankind, nature symbolizes both paradise and death. The speaker brings up images of nature associated with religion, and finally, nature's independence and disregard for human affairs. Additionally, there is an overwhelming theme of happiness. The poem begins with a woman thinking over her own happiness on Sunday morning and considering whether or not she should feel guilty. It is a state of being she does not want to end, and the reason the speaker dwells into discussions of paradise and its similarities and differences to life on earth. Summary of the poem, The Sunday Morning. Sunday Morning by Wallace Stevens discusses the nature of the afterlife and the role of God and nature in the creation of paradise. The poem begins with the speaker describing a woman spending her Sunday morning sitting outside rather than going to church. She falls into a dream that makes her feel guilty about the death of Christ. The dream includes a journey to Palestine and Christ's tomb. Although she feels something, she is still skeptical about religion. She isn't ready to give up her life and all its pressures to the Christian God. In the next stanza, the speaker compares the Christ to the Greek and Roman god Jove. Jove is different because he only represents the sun rather than actually being it. The speaker wonders over the desire of humans to create religion and whether or not paradise can exist. The next section returns to the perspective of the woman who is described as finding peace in the sight of birds walking around and taking off for a day of flight. She believes that beauty is something to be loved and death to be feared. The speaker pushes back against the opinion, stating that beauty cannot exist without death. In an effort to illustrate his point, he describes the actions of pagan men who worship the sun because of its influence on the land rather than what powers it might wield as a god. The men are not burdened by the expectation of the Christian God or any all-seeing commanding power. They simply exist in the world, similar to how nature will exist in the final stanza. The last stanza contains another portion of the woman's dream of Christ's tomb. This time, the vision is speaking to her and describing the tomb as nothing more than a burial place. It is not home to spirits. In conclusion, the speaker goes over everything he previously stated and ends with a wish to know nature without looking through a human lens. Analysis of Sunday Morning. Stanza 1. In the first stanza of the piece, the speaker begins by describing the emotions of a woman who is sitting outside on a Sunday morning. She is wearing a lace nightgown and eating a late breakfast. Down at her feet, there is a cockatoo. It is described as being green and free. She looks down on the animal and feels at peace. She is tasting a little bit of the freedom the bird knows so well because she is so deeply involved in the peace of the moment. She is able to forget about the ancient sacrifice. This is a clear reference when taken into consideration along with the title to the death of Christ. Her guilt at doing nothing on this Sunday but enjoying the world is lightened. The woman seems to doze off for a moment. At first she is simply dreaming, but things take a dark turn. An undefined yet familiar darkness is coming closer. This is again another reference to Christ and his crucifixion. Her calm attitude toward life is slipping away and she is reverting to religious tendencies. Stevens introduces the image of water, something that appears throughout his works. Stevens describes the woman as looking out towards the water and seeing a procession of the dead. They appear as colors resembling the bright greens and oranges of the first few lines. This time they are different though. They are foreboding as they move across white water without sound. Zooming back from the close look on this woman's life, the speaker compares the entire day to the same white water without sound. The woman is dreaming that she is passing over the now still water towards Palestine, where Christ was crucified. It is home to the sepulchre or tomb where Christ was placed. Stanza 2. In contrast to the absolute silence of the scene at the end of the first stanza, the second picks up with a bit of renitence on the woman's part. She is not going to passively give her bounty to the dead. Her bounty likely refers to her life on earth and therefore her faith. She is not completely convinced in her Christianity. The next lines contain her concerns about giving up the pleasures of the sun and pungent fruit. She wants to keep her possessions around her rather than give them up to the church. Her doubt is furthered by the fact that Christ only comes to her in her dreams and is gone before she can get any answers. Rather than seeking divinity with faith, she states that she needs to find it within herself. It is seen through her own passions and moods, her grief and elation, as well as pleasures and pains from it. In these lines, she is relating her internal divinity to nature. Her passion is like the rain and her moods falling snow. She feels elation when the forests bloom and great emotions on autumn nights. These are the experiences around which she needs to measure her soul. Her life will be judged by what she feels and does. Stanza 3. The third stanza begins with a reference to Job, the Roman equivalent to Zeus. This new religious ideology is introduced in order to make a comparison with Christianity. In the poem, he is described as being inhuman, unlike Christ. He had no mother to take care of him, nor a sweet land to call home. Job's mind is mythy or filled with myths. This likely is a reference to all myth emerging from the Job, the central figurehead. The next lines are more obscure and confusing. Stevens is speaking about Job as a god who moved through his hints or among the common people. He would grow frustrated by the fact that no one says his magnificence and recognized him for who he was. In the simple, Job represents humanity's ability to form myth. The hints took their inspiration from a star. Suddenly that star was recognized as Jupiter or Job. As if it had been him all along, humanity gave birth to the myth of Job. They gave their life and blood to it. This image will appear again in the 7th stanza. The speaker goes on to ask if the blood they used to create what should be a comforting myth will fail, or more simply, will the myth stand the test of time? Alternatively, the speaker asks if instead the earth will be all the paradise we shall know. The speaker is concerned this might not be enough for humanity. In the future, when the world becomes a paradise, the only paradise, the sky will be much friendlier. It will be closer to the nature than a divine being. Rather than worry more about God's expectations when looking to the sky, humanity will feel connected to nature. Stanza 4. In the 4th stanza, the speaker returns to the narrative within the woman's mind. There is a change in the narrative perspective, meaning that the reader gets a first-person account of how she feels. She says first that she feels content to look at the birds when they have first woken up. The speaker thinks about their rest, their preparations to fly, and the journeys they will undertake that day. She describes their questionings. This is a reference to the way birds move along the ground before they take off as if searching for something. At some point, moment the birds take off and the warm fields they come from are never the same. It is important to remember that all of these images are coming from the emotions associated with the Sunday morning. She is looking at her carpet and at the cockatoo and letting her imagination run wild. This was customary within Stevens' work. He maintains a reputation for exploring the edges of what the imagination could do. The quotation that marks end at this point and the poem reverts back to the third person speaker. These lines are quite complex and outline the speaker's understanding that women hopes of similar peace again in the future. He explores a number of versions of the future, the art life and ideal paradise. This includes the golden underground and the visionary south, a place no one has explored. At the end of this action, the speaker returns to the real world and note these fantasies may or may not exist. Nature is real. This includes April's green and the women's own memory of the birds. Stanza 5. The fifth stanza returns to the female speaker's thoughts. She is responding to the previous stanza in which the other speaker, perhaps Stevens himself, presents his thoughts on the future. Although she accepts the speaker's argument that there are always going to be beautiful things in nature, she wants something more. She needs bliss to be truly happy and the need for it will not go away. The other speaker responds immediately. He asks the women how beauty is supposed to exist without death. It is the mother of everything wonderful. It causes the end of things that one loves and leads one to lose as it strews the leaves of sure obliteration. Death forces one to change paths and find a new one that is easier to see. In contrast to the loss caused by death, there is still the beauty. It instigates change and often change is what brings about the parts of nature most loved. Stephen Speaker described boys who use an old plate that was perhaps once valuable for a new purpose. They pile on plums and pears all the while the maidens wander through the scene taking in the pure joy of a world changed. Stanza 6. The speaker continues on to question a paradise that does not include death. If this existed, there would never be any ripe fruit or rivers that reached the ocean. It is more than death the speaker is interested in. It is the idea of application of change and transformation. Eventually, the speaker gets to the main point of these assertions, which is that heaven is not necessarily better than earth. The next lines return to the description of the plums and pears from the previous stanza. This time, the speaker is placing them in heaven and noting how the maidens do not cow. The act of setting out the fruit is pointless. He continues on to say that in heaven they are not going to be wearing our colors, or more simply, paradise will not be recognizable to any human being. Humanity does not have the ability to accurately envision it before entering. This speaks to a restriction of one's imagination. What the speaker does now is that in a perfect world where nothing changes, pleasure should soon turn to boredom. In the final lines of the sixth stanza, he creates the same message about death, that it is only due to its presence that the world holds any appeal at all. Within the human mind, beauty and death should not be in the same, they are both mothers to humanity. Stanza 7. Speaker presents a contrast to the Christian heaven in the seventh stanza. He turns to discuss paganism and an orgy. At this particular celebration, the men are worshipping the sun and likely drinking and dancing. The pagans were devoted to the sun not as a symbol of the Christian God but as their benefactor. It is from the sun that all life stems. Rather than being a god, it is only like a god. It is clear the speaker sees this kind of worship and understands it. He too wants to see nature as the true God. It is important to note here the reference back to the third stanza, which she spoke about Job and the importance of imagination in religion. Even though paganism might make more sense to the speaker, it is still driven by humanity's imagination. Without human thought and worship, the sun would be nothing but a star. While the pagan men chant, other elements enter into the conversation, voice by voice. There is the windy lake as well as the trees and the echoing hills which adds their sounds to the celebration. Through their orgy, the pagans are able to grow closer to the natural world. They know a heavenly fellowship with the rest of the world, so much so that the dew which covers the feet seems to hold their future. Nature holds the essence of humanity, from birth to beauty to death. It does not matter to the man in this moment where they are going or what their lives will consist of. Stanza 8. In the last stanza of the poem, returns to the first stanzas in which the woman dreams of Palestine. The water she was originally seeing comes back. This time it is speaking to her. It states that there is not a port or area in Palestine in which spirits are lingering. The grave of Jesus is nothing more but a place where he lay. The final lines are told from the perspective of the original speaker as he goes back over everything he spoke about previously. He begins by saying that from one perspective, the pagan one, the world is just day and night. There is chaos and the way chaos acts on and within nature, and that's it. Thinking of the world this way makes humanity unsponsored and free. No one is tied down to the demands of a special selfish god. The speaker concludes the poem by taking away all his previous philosophies about nature. The opinions of the dreaming women are disregarded and nature is seen on its own terms. It is made up of the progress of life. There are deer in the mountain and berries growing, ripening and dying in the wilderness where no one will ever see them. He also described the pigeons in isolation in the sky, again with no companions to comment on their progress. In the last lines, the image of the pigeons recedes into darkness, a final allusion to the power and importance of death. So that's all about the different stanzas of this poem. It was actually analysis of this poem. It is a so you see this is a very difficult poem, and the elements of Christianity is being described in this poem. You have to look very closely into this poem to understand each and every point that is discussed. So learn this poem thoroughly. Thank you.